So I got some news for you. Listen to this, and I'm going to be able to back it up in the Word of God. God is pro-choice.
At 75, Bishop Paul Morton is finally addressing questions that have followed him and his marriage for years. To many, he and Dr. Deborah Morton represented faith, commitment, and unwavering partnership. But behind the public image was a story far more complicated than most people realized. As long-standing rumors resurfaced and hidden struggles came into focus, the conversation shifted from appearances to reality. What really happened behind closed doors, and why are these revelations drawing so much attention now? The answers reveal a deeply personal journey marked by faith, hardship, and difficult truths. Behind the perfect reputation, for many years, Bishop Paul Morton was viewed as a respected leader whose influence extended far beyond the church walls. His messages about faith, family, and perseverance inspired countless people. And alongside his wife, Dr. Deborah Morton, he appeared to represent a marriage rooted in love, commitment, and shared purpose. To supporters and followers, they seemed like the kind of couple who had found the secret to lasting happiness. From conference stages to church services, the image was remarkably consistent. They stood side by side, offering guidance to others while projecting a sense of unity that many admired. Their relationship became an example that people pointed to when discussing strong marriages and enduring partnerships. Few questioned what they saw, and even fewer imagined there could be another side to the story. Yet, the reality behind public appearances is often far more complicated than what audiences are allowed to see. Over time, quiet speculation began circulating among those who followed their ministry closely. Nothing dramatic, nothing that immediately grabbed headlines. Just small observations, subtle moments, and lingering questions that never seemed to receive clear answers. Most people brushed them aside. After all, when someone has spent decades building a reputation for wisdom and leadership, it becomes difficult for others to imagine that serious struggles could exist beneath the surface. That assumption would eventually become part of the larger story. The pressure that comes with public leadership can be enormous. For individuals held to such high standards, admitting personal difficulties often feels impossible. Expectations grow so strong that maintaining the appearance of stability becomes a responsibility in itself. As a result, problems that might otherwise be addressed openly are often pushed into the shadows. In many ways, that is what made the situation surrounding the Mortons so intriguing. The more polished the image appeared, the more surprising later revelations would become. Looking back, some would wonder whether the warning signs had always been there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice them. And perhaps the most fascinating question was this: how much can remain concealed when an entire community believes they already know the full story? As time passed, the gap between public perception and private reality grew wider. Behind the applause, the admiration, and the carefully maintained image was a chapter few people understood. And at the center of it all was someone who had remained silent for far longer than most realized. That silence belonged to Dr. Deborah Morton, and what she would eventually reveal would change the conversation entirely. What no one knew about Deborah Morton: long before the public conversations began, there was a story unfolding behind closed doors, one that few people ever imagined. While audiences saw Dr. Deborah Morton standing confidently beside her husband, supporting the ministry and encouraging others, her private experience was far different from the image that appeared on stage. For years, she fulfilled the responsibilities expected of her. She attended events, supported church initiatives, and stood beside Bishop Paul Morton as his ministry continued to grow. To outsiders, she appeared strong, composed, and fully content in her role. But appearances often reveal only part of the picture. According to Dr. Morton, there were moments when she felt increasingly disconnected within her own marriage. While much of her husband's attention was devoted to serving others, she struggled with feelings that remained largely unspoken. The demands of leadership and ministry consumed enormous amounts of time and energy. leaving little room for conversations that might have addressed deeper emotional concerns. What made the situation even more difficult was the expectation surrounding her position. Within many faith communities, pastors' wives are often viewed as symbols of strength and unwavering support. There is an unspoken belief that they should endure hardships quietly, avoid public complaints, and place the needs of the ministry above their own personal struggles. Over time, that expectation can become a burden that few people truly understand. Rather than speaking openly about her frustrations, Dr. Morton chose silence. Year after year, she continued moving forward while carrying emotions that remained hidden from the congregation, the public, and sometimes even those closest to her. It was a decision shaped by loyalty, responsibility, and a desire to avoid creating controversy. But silence has a way of accumulating weight. The longer difficult conversations are postponed, the more powerful the emotions behind them can become. What starts as patience can eventually turn into loneliness. What begins as sacrifice can slowly transform into exhaustion. And for Dr. Morton, those feelings did not disappear simply because they were kept private. As she later shared more of her experiences, many people were surprised by how deeply her words resonated. Her story reflected struggles that countless others had faced in their own relationships, but rarely discussed publicly. Suddenly, the image of a perfect marriage became far more complicated. Yet, emotional distance was only part of the story. Behind the scenes, there were deeper concerns involving trust, decision-making, and a growing imbalance that would eventually bring some of the most serious challenges in their marriage to the surface. And when those details emerged, the conversation shifted in a way no one could ignore. The decisions that changed everything. As more details emerged about the challenges inside the Morton household, one issue stood out above the rest. It wasn't simply about feeling unheard or emotionally distant. According to Dr. Deborah Morton, there were moments when major decisions affecting their family were made without her knowledge or involvement. For her, that represented something much deeper than a disagreement. It raised serious questions about trust, respect, and partnership. Every marriage faces difficult moments, but the strongest relationships often rely on communication during those times. When one person feels excluded from important decisions, especially those involving the family's future, the damage can extend far beyond the issue itself. It can leave lasting doubts about whether both voices truly matter. For Dr. Morton, this became one of the clearest examples of a growing imbalance within the relationship. She described situations where she felt more like an observer than an equal participant in decisions that directly affected her life. While Bishop Paul Morton carried tremendous responsibility as a spiritual leader, critics and supporters alike began asking whether that leadership dynamic had unintentionally crossed into areas where partnership should have taken priority. The concerns weren't limited to a single incident. Instead, they seemed to reflect a larger pattern that had developed over time. As years passed, unresolved frustrations quietly accumulated beneath the surface. From the outside, everything still appeared stable. The public saw sermons, conferences, and ministry success. What they didn't see were the difficult conversations happening, or sometimes not happening, behind the scenes. That contrast made the revelations particularly striking. Many followers had spent years viewing the Mortons as an example of unity and mutual support. The possibility that significant disagreements had been hidden from public view challenged assumptions people had held for decades. Suddenly, the story was no longer about rumors. It became a discussion about accountability, communication, and the realities that can exist behind even the most admired public image. The situation also highlighted a broader issue within many leadership roles. When one person holds significant authority in public life, maintaining balance at home can become increasingly complicated. Without intentional communication, influence can slowly replace collaboration, often without anyone recognizing it until problems become impossible to ignore. For Dr. Morton, reaching the point of speaking openly suggested that years of silence had finally reached their limit. The questions she raised resonated far beyond her own marriage, prompting many people to examine similar dynamics within their own relationships. But what happened next would take the conversation to an entirely different level. Once these private struggles entered the public spotlight, reactions came quickly and passionately. Supporters, critics, church members, and longtime followers all had something to say, and the response would reveal just how deeply these revelations had shaken the community. The reaction no one could ignore. Once Dr. Deborah Morton's experiences became public, the response was immediate. What had once been private conversations and quiet concerns suddenly became the center of a much larger discussion. Across social media, church circles, and online forums, people began debating what the revelations meant, not only for the Mortons, but for the broader conversation surrounding leadership, marriage, and accountability. For many longtime supporters, the news was difficult to process. The couple had spent years representing faith, commitment, and stability. To hear that significant struggles had existed behind the scenes left some followers stunned. Many found themselves questioning whether the image they had admired for so long had ever reflected the full reality. Others wrestled with an even more uncomfortable question: how often do people mistake appearances for truth? The reactions varied dramatically. Some expressed sympathy for Dr. Morton, praising her willingness to speak openly after years of silence. They viewed her decision not as an act of criticism, but as a courageous effort to share experiences that countless others could relate to. To these supporters, her honesty opened an important conversation about emotional well-being, communication, and the pressures often placed on spouses within ministry settings. Not everyone agreed. There were also those who felt the situation should have remained private. Critics argued that discussing marital struggles publicly risked damaging both Bishop Morton's reputation and the ministry he had spent decades building. In their view, certain matters belonged behind closed doors, regardless of the circumstances. That divide quickly became impossible to ignore. As discussions intensified, people began sharing stories of their own. Some revealed personal experiences involving difficult marriages, hidden struggles, and the pressure to maintain appearances despite private pain. Others admitted they had noticed moments of tension surrounding the Mortons over the years, but never imagined the situation ran as deep as it apparently did. What started as one family's story gradually became something much larger. Church members, community leaders, and observers began asking broader questions about leadership and transparency. Should public figures be expected to appear perfect? Can faith communities create space for honesty without viewing vulnerability as weakness? And perhaps most importantly, what happens when protecting an image becomes more important than addressing a problem? As those conversations spread, another revelation captured attention. Dr. Morton shared that speaking openly had not been an easy decision. According to her, there had been times when remaining silent was encouraged for the sake of protecting reputations and avoiding controversy. That detail added an entirely new layer to the story and intensified the public debate. But, while discussions continued to grow louder, attention began shifting toward one person everyone was waiting to hear from. Would Bishop Paul Morton remain silent, or would he finally respond to the questions that had placed his family, his leadership, and his legacy under an unprecedented spotlight? Bishop Morton faces the controversy. As public discussion continued to intensify, attention increasingly centered on Bishop Paul Morton himself. For months, people had heard different perspectives, analyzed rumors, and debated the claims being shared. But many felt that one critical piece of the story was still missing. They wanted to hear directly from the man at the center of it all. Soon enough, that moment arrived. In front of a congregation that had trusted his leadership for years, Bishop Morton addressed the controversy publicly. It was a significant moment, not because it provided every answer people were seeking, but because it marked a departure from the silence that had surrounded many of the concerns being discussed. Those who watched closely noticed a different side of the longtime church leader. Rather than speaking solely as a pastor, he appeared to speak as a husband, a father, and an individual reflecting on difficult realities. The conversation shifted away from image and reputation and moved towards something far more personal. For some, that willingness to address the situation carried weight. Supporters viewed it as an important step forward. They believed acknowledging mistakes required courage, especially when those mistakes become part of a public conversation. Many felt that genuine growth begins when someone is willing to confront uncomfortable truths rather than avoid them. But not everyone was ready to move on. Others questioned whether the response came too late. They wondered why concerns had remained buried for so many years, and whether the acknowledgement would have happened at all without increasing public attention. Those questions created a level of skepticism that would not disappear overnight. And perhaps that was understandable. When trust is damaged, rebuilding it is rarely simple. Apologies may open the door, but meaningful repair usually depends on actions that follow. This reality became one of the central themes surrounding the Morton story. People were no longer focused solely on what had happened in the past. They were watching closely to see what choices would be made moving forward. The discussion also sparked a broader conversation within faith communities. Many people began examining the pressures placed on spiritual leaders and their families. There is often an expectation that those in ministry should appear strong at all times, even when facing personal challenges. As a result, struggles that should be addressed openly can remain hidden far longer than they should. The situation forced many followers to confront a difficult truth. Leadership does not eliminate human flaws. In fact, some argued that the willingness to acknowledge weakness can be more powerful than maintaining an appearance of perfection. As the weeks passed, signs of change began to emerge. Efforts toward healing, reflection, and accountability became part of the ongoing conversation. While opinions remained divided, there was a growing sense that both Bishop and Dr. Morton were entering a new chapter, one that would require honesty, patience, and difficult work from everyone involved. At the same time, Dr. Morton continued to earn admiration from those who respected her decision to speak openly. Her willingness to share deeply personal experiences transformed her from a supporting figure into a voice that many people found relatable and inspiring. Still, public statements and promises were only the beginning. The real challenge would come afterward, when the cameras stopped rolling and the attention started to fade. Because overcoming years of hurt is one thing, building something stronger in its place is another. And that raises the biggest question of all. After everything that had been revealed, could the Mortons find a way forward together? Or had the most difficult part of their journey only just begun? Healing. After the headlines. After months of difficult conversations, public scrutiny, and emotional revelations, the Mortons faced a decision that many people had been wondering about from the very beginning. Would their marriage survive everything that had come to light? The answer surprised many observers. Rather than walking away from one another, Bishop Paul Morton and Dr. Deborah Morton chose to continue moving forward together. It was not a decision that erased past struggles or instantly repaired damaged trust. Instead, it represented a commitment to confront those challenges directly and work through them despite the obstacles ahead. For many people following the story, that choice became one of the most unexpected developments of all. Over time, a noticeable shift began to take place. The focus gradually moved away from defending reputations and toward creating a more honest foundation. The image of perfection that had followed the couple for years was no longer the priority. What mattered now was authenticity. Instead of pretending every problem had been solved, they appeared more willing to acknowledge that healing is often messy, slow, and far from straightforward. That message resonated with many supporters. People who had experienced struggles in their own relationships saw something familiar in the Mortons' journey. They recognized that lasting relationships are not built on the absence of conflict, but on the willingness to address it. In that sense, the story evolved from a controversy into a lesson about resilience, accountability, and personal growth. As the process continued, Dr. Morton emerged with a stronger public voice than ever before. No longer viewed solely as the wife of a prominent bishop, she became a respected figure in her own right. Her willingness to speak honestly about difficult experiences encouraged others to examine issues they had kept hidden for years. For many, her story became a reminder that silence may protect appearances, but it rarely heals wounds. Meanwhile, Bishop Morton appeared to embrace a different approach to leadership, one that allowed greater vulnerability and transparency. While opinions about the situation remained divided, many observers acknowledged that confronting imperfections publicly required a level of humility rarely seen from high-profile figures. Of course, not everyone viewed the outcome the same way. Some remained skeptical, while others continued to debate the decisions that had led to the controversy in the first place. Yet even those disagreements highlighted an important reality. The conversation had moved beyond rumors and speculation. It had become a reflection on relationships, leadership, forgiveness, and the cost of keeping painful truths hidden. Today, the Mortons' journey serves as a reminder that no marriage, family, or public figure is immune to hardship. Behind every reputation lies a human story, often far more complicated than it appears from the outside. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. True strength is not found in appearing flawless. It is found in facing difficult truths, learning from them, and finding the courage to keep moving forward when the world is watching. Every story has more than one side, and sometimes the truth is far more complicated than it first appears. What are your thoughts on the Mortons' journey? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to watch our next video for more remarkable stories.